Good morning and welcome to Apple This Week. My name is Alex Webb. My colleague Mark Gurman, who usually I host this with, is on holiday this week, the lucky so-and-so. So we're going to be talking over, or I'm going to be talking through some of the issues that have been in the news this week at Apple, but primarily we're going to be focusing on China and some of the issues that Apple has had there. We had a story about this from my colleagues in Asia yesterday. Before I pile into that, it'd be great to hear any questions that you guys have. Please post them on the Facebook page, on the Facebook stream, and I will try to answer as many as possible. I've got my sturdy iPhone here to tackle them, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say. But yeah, the topic at hand, Apple in China. Now, as we know, in the past couple of years, China has been a real growth driver for Apple. It has accounted for well, last year in 2015, like 59 billion of its 233 billion in sales came from China. It's seen huge growth there. Now, the problem has been this year, that has declined substantially from 59 billion to 48 in the 2015 versus 2016 fiscal year. And there are a number of reasons for that. We have seen their market share decline substantially. It has not been about the fact that the Chinese market has slowed down. It's been to do with Apple losing market share. And the two companies have really come out of nowhere to steal this market share are called Oppo and Vivo. Now, they're set up by the same guy. This is a gentleman called Duan Yongping. And they have, on the one hand, played the product launch game very cleverly. They came to market with their products late last year, earlier this year, and they therefore got ahead of Apple. Apple, which of course introduced the iPhone 7 just in the past month or so. So they got a head start on Apple in having the newest product on the market. And of course now, the phones that they make are lower cost and frankly not vastly different in terms of performance from the iPhone. Perhaps a little bit worse, but not substantially so. Certainly not hundreds of dollars so. I think that's perception out of China. But there's a more interesting element to this, and this is what my colleagues in Beijing wrote in the story. Is really, I highly recommend it if you can find it on our website. The title is How Apple Lost China to Two Unknown Local Smartphone Makers. And what Apple has done to expand its market share in China has been to build more retail stores and try to get into the sales channels of the Chinese carriers, China Mobiles of the world, and so on. Now, what Vivo and Oppo have done is they have made a concerted effort to target the electronics retailers directly, and not just in the major cities, but in the Chinese hinterland, in the second-tier cities and third-tier towns which are not at all places we're likely to have heard of in North America. So the things they've done is they've expanded their own sales channels, gone and cozied up to these smaller retailers. They have also shared a greater proportion of their profits with these retailers. And so that has helped them really expand the amount of space they get in electronic stores around China in a way that Apple has not yet managed to do. Now, of course, Apple could, if they wanted to, try and do this. But the danger is, the more salespeople you have, the more expensive it is to run that sort of sales network. So Apple has to make a decision. Either it keeps on selling sticks with the sales strategy it has, i.e. target high-value customers, well-to-do luxury buyers in the main Chinese cities. And they are people who are frankly more likely to buy the iPhone at the higher price point, or to go after these perhaps less affluent customers in other Chinese cities. Now, the idea I think a lot of people thought when Apple introduced the iPhone SE earlier this year in March was to go after those kind of buyers. But the SE was introduced only just after these high-end models from Oppo and Vivo, who they have higher specifications than the SE did. And Apple's, as we said, does not have these same sales channels and the ability to get the SE into as many storefronts as the Chinese had done so, or their Chinese competitors had done. So let's dig a little bit more into who exactly Oppo and Vivo are. The founder, as I said, Mr. Duan Yongping, he actually lives over here in the US, but he has built these two companies which almost exclusively target the Chinese market. And there are two models. We take the Oppo R9 Plus. Now, that sells for almost half the price of the iPhone 7. But it has a 6-inch display, 16 megapixel camera, battery which purportedly does 19 hours of calls, photo and web browsing. And I mean, that's the cheaper one. Then Vivo has its X Play 6, which costs just a little bit less than the iPhone 7, and has very, very similar specifications. They've been investing heavily in marketing in China. Now, Apple does do marketing, but it's the point of sales which they've perhaps been lagging a little bit compared to these Chinese guys. So just a reminder again, if you guys have any questions, it'd be great to hear them. To do with China or any of the other things that have happened this week. There were some other stories which might be worth digging into. The Business Insider reporter Kiffer Swing had an interesting piece yesterday talking about Johnny Ive. Now, he made the point that Johnny Ive, when he was interviewed by The New Yorker a few years ago, and they said, do you ever think of retiring? And he said, I don't know what I'd do in retirement. Maybe I'd make Christmas tree decorations. And he said that jokingly. Now, Kif picked up on a very good point that Johnny Ive recently made the tree for Claridge's, which is a department store in London, and that was a side project. He literally built a Christmas tree. So very similar to this idea of what would he do if he were doing nothing. He would build a Christmas tree. And so he then asked the question, to what extent is Johnny Ive really still active at Apple? It's true that we've not seen a huge amount of presence from him in recent marketing campaigns, launches for the iPhone 7 and indeed the iPhone SE. Some even asked whether he was present at the iPhone SE launch. A lot of people didn't see him. The point was made by someone on Twitter that Johnny did more press for the design book that Apple launched last week than he did for the iPhone in recent months, which I thought was an interesting point to make. I've got a question come in. Is Apple losing ground because of a lack of products or innovation? I mean, lack of products. Apple's always tried very hard to focus on core products. It doesn't want to have a panoply of different items coming to market. It wants to focus very keenly on a few select things. Nonetheless, we have seen those products diversify in recent years. I think there are multiple versions of the iPhone now. If you think about the different colors, literally the different models themselves between iPhone SE, iPhone 6s, and the iPhone 7. And then the different screen size. So to say they focus on a small handful is not necessarily true anymore. Within each product category, there is a diversity of options, or there are a diversity of options. Innovation, I think that one of the reasons that innovation maybe has been held back slightly is because they focus on these small product categories. The argument has been made that innovation has been taken as far as possible, or there's not much more innovation that you can do in smartphones, that it's plateaued to a certain extent. And so that perhaps is a limiting factor, and is why people get very excited when we hear about Apple's investigations into a car, which we, as we reported, has been shrunk down to just a software idea for the moment. The story that we had about Apple possibly making glasses, I think they're investigating a lot of different product categories, but there's very little that you can do which will match the iPhone in terms of universal appeal, in terms of everybody needing or wanting a smartphone. If you look at some of the stats, Apple sells, I think, close to about $120 billion worth of iPhones every year. Now, if you look at the premium automotive market, that market is worth $220 billion every year. So if Apple were to have a car, it would, and they would expect it to have the same growth potential as the iPhone, it would have to be owning 50% of that market. Now, there are lots of very long-held, established players in that market, which means it's very, very hard. I mean, I picked that as an example, but there are a lot of other spaces which, we've got to be looking at new product categories which have been unthought of up to now, I think, for Apple to enjoy anything like the success that it might have had with the iPhone. It's very, very difficult. I'm sure there are examples out there, but I think they're few and far between. I've got a question about where Samsung fits into the Chinese market. Now, let's give Apple their fair due. They have done a lot better than Samsung in recent years. Samsung's market share, having dominated, I think, 3 years ago, has really fallen off a cliff, fallen precipitously. I think they're down to 6th place in terms of market share in China right now. Of course, not helped by the battery situation. I'm unsure how they're going to tackle that market. That is something that I really need to ask some of my Asian colleagues. So, Apple, as much as they've had some difficulties there, it has been nowhere near the troubles that Samsung has had. I think that the next question, are Apple products overpriced for a Chinese consumer? It's not necessarily that the products are overpriced in and of themselves. There was a time when it was overpriced or they were expensive, and people were able to say, well, it's a luxury product, I want a luxury product, it's a status symbol, and so they would still buy it. I think that is decreasingly the case. China was, it's seen that the middle class grow, and the middle class, I think, is less obsessed now with American brand names than it might have been in the past. And so the appeal of someone like Oppo or Vivo, and on a lesser level, Xiaomi and Huawei, is growing, and the actual specifications of the product have become more important than the name, the brand stamped upon it. Another question coming in, what else do we know about Oppo and Vivo? Would they ever come to the US? I think actually the products are available in the US. We haven't seen as yet a vast marketing campaign to bring the products here. They think they do perhaps have a slight advantage over Huawei. It's a very simple one, that their names are more easily pronounceable for Western consumers. Huawei is, of course, spelled Huawei. For a lot of people have no idea how to pronounce it, and I think that makes a very big deal when it comes to trying to sell products to new consumers. I think we've probably talked a little bit enough now about some things been going on this week. It has been slow in the lead up to Thanksgiving. So on that note, I will wish you all a delightful Thanksgiving if you are in this part of the world. And well, when you get to the weekend, it's a long weekend over here, but have an enjoyable rest of the week at any rate.